In our last video, we continued our look at the sarcomere. We looked at how you have myosin in the middle that's attached to the M line, and then actin flanking it on either side. That makes the light, dark, light banding pattern of skeletal muscle. We looked at how there's an I band where you only have actin, you have an A band where the myosin is, and an H zone in the middle where you only have myosin. So this part of the A band is not in the H zone because there's actin. And when muscle contracts, this disappears. We also looked at how myosin is a grabby little 14-year-old boy trying to grab the innocent actin, the teenage girl, and how there must be a chaperone, and that chaperone is the troponin tropomyosin complex. The troponin is what the calcium binds to move the tropomyosin away from the active site, and tropomyosin is guarding the active site with its dear life. We then talked about motor units. A motor unit is a single motor neuron, actually the axon, which we'll learn in chapter 12 of the motor neuron, attached to all the muscle fibers. So this green motor unit is attached to 3 fibers. This purple motor unit is going to be only attached to 2 fibers. And we talked about how it looked at this terminal. So this purple thing, I guess it's magenta, looks like this. It's an axon, and it has a swelling at the end called a synaptic bulb, an axon knob, a synaptic knob. I'm sure if I open Google, I'll find 20 more names for it. And it has these vesicles. Vesicles are little containment pods containing a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, or ACH. If I wrote it out, it would end up that long. Now, there's a gap between the muscle, which would be down here, and the axon and the axon bulb or synaptic bulb. And there are ACH receptors. What happens when the muscle starts to contract, or is told to contract, is these vesicles leave, the ACH comes out, and it binds to the receptors. That's going to let sodium into the cell. And that creates something called an action potential, which is just an electrical current. And that electrical current goes across the cell membrane down the T tubule. And that's where we left off. So again, you have an electrical current called an action potential going down the axon. And it releases this neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter binds, lets sodium in, creates another action potential that goes along the sarcolemma down the T tubule. So here's that slide. A nerve impulse travels to the synaptic bulb, releases acetylcholine, and that acetylcholine attaches to receptors. It lets sodium in, and this creates an electrical current. You'll learn more about how and why in physiology, and this is going to tell the muscle to contract. Now, your physiology teacher does expect me to teach you a little bit. So, this electrical current, what happens is it travels down the cell membrane, or the sarcolemma. So here's the vesicle. It is releasing acetylcholine binds, sodium comes in. And this electrical current goes down the T tubule, see T tubule. And there's a very special receptor right there. What happens when this electrical current reaches that receptor is it opens a door on the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So remember the sarcoplasmic reticulum, what does it store? It stores calcium. So we have all this calcium in here. So again, action potential or electrical current comes down, releases acetylcholine. Acetylcholine binds to its receptors, lets sodium in, creates another action potential or electrical current, goes down to these special receptors, opens this door on the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and lets calcium out. Wait, what did calcium do? Oh yeah, calcium binds to the troponin molecule. Remember the troponin? So calcium is going to bind to that. That is sort of like getting the chaperone drunk. So troponin is going to move tropomyosin. The tropomyosin moves out of the way of the active site, and the 14-year-old boy, the myosin, can finally grab the actin. And it pulls. Not pushes, not folds, it pulls. And this is going to shorten the sarcomere. Remember, we have our myosin, like so. We have our actin in between attached to the Z disc. Yes, I'm bad for drawing this all in one color. So the myosin pulls towards the M line, the H zone vanishes, and the I band vanishes. So I have said that at least 4 times now. You need to know that for the test. And the muscle shortens. Now, this is going to shorten the muscle by a nanometer. Not very much. But considering how you have 1,000 sarcomeres in one skeletal muscle fiber, each one going a nanometer is going to make the muscle shorten. So when muscles contract, they shorten. So what is a motor unit? No, it's not just a muscle fiber. It's not a motor neuron. Multiple motor neurons in one fiber, that's the opposite. One motor neuron and all the fibers it connects to. So we have our neuron going out, it branches. Yes, I apparently really like the red pen right now. So it's all the fibers it attaches to. So this motor neuron attaches to these fibers. What vanishes when the muscle contracts? P and Q, I have no idea what that is. We didn't learn it. T-tubule, that can't vanish. A and M, no. The H zone and the I band. So again, on your test, it's alphabet soup. Electrical impulses, Q, R, S, or T. Well, the tubule looks like a letter T, so it's called a T-tubule. And I'm going to ask you something about the sequence. What is the sequence? So, sodium enters, goes down the T-tubule, calcium is released, calcium binds to troponin, troponin moves tropomyosin, it contracts, calcium enters, binds to troponin, down the T-tubule, sodium, no, that's not it. Sodium bind, no, so it's the first one. So, we're going to look at characteristics of the other fibers now in skeletal muscle. In skeletal muscle, there's at least 3 fibers. And usually I ask, what part of the turkey do you like to eat on Thanksgiving? Well, I like the dark meat, and the dark meat's in the legs of the turkey. And what's the turkey doing all day long? I actually have my garage door open while I'm making this. I'm worried about the wild turkeys coming in and attacking me. What are they going to be doing? They're going to be walking. So the dark meat is in the turkey legs, and we have these wild turkeys that do laps around our block all day long. So turkeys, they have these muscles that are very fatigue resistant for walking. Have you ever seen a turkey fly? Well, said wild turkeys can fly from the ground to the top of the telephone pole in 2 seconds. It then spends 5 minutes recovering because it's out of breath. So you have these other muscle fibers, the white meat, that can actually do very powerful contractions, but they get tired very quickly. Then your homework is to go get rotisserie chicken, by the way. If you look at the spine of rotisserie chicken, it's actually black meat, not dark meat, it's black. That's because it has a lot more of this protein called myoglobin in it. So, the colors are because of these 3 different types of skeletal muscle fibers. So we have cardiac muscle fibers, we have smooth muscle cells, I guess, and then skeletal muscle fibers that are subdivided into 3 types. Now, each muscle contains a mixture of all 3 fibers, but the proportions vary on genetics, how you're using them, and what the muscle is. So my soleus, that's part of my calf muscle, that has a lot of these slow twitch muscles because I'm standing all day long. Whereas my gastrocnemius, don't say gastrocnemius anywhere near me, the gastrocnemius, which is the other part, has a lot of these white muscle fibers. And if the gym was ever open again, I'm going to do box jumps. And I'm going to be using those. I could probably jump 20 inches on the box jump. I used to be able to jump 36, but that was years ago. So, different muscles, fibers, are used for different things, and they're recruited as needed. So, dude here is lifting weights. He is probably using some fast twitch muscles because it's a really quick jerk. Whereas she might be running a marathon, which is 26 miles and change. And she's probably using slow twitch fibers. So, let us begin. Slow twitch fibers. These are type 1. So that is a Roman numeral 1. And it's the smallest muscle fiber. So it's going to be the smallest. And because of this, it has the least amount of actin and myosin, so it's very weak. You're going to learn that distance affects diffusion in physiology. And the bigger muscle fibers, the type 2B fibers, are like this. And the problem is oxygen can't really quickly diffuse through them. So they make up for not having a lot of actin and myosin with oxygen being able to go through very quickly. So they're dark red in color. This is going to be the black meat of the rotisserie chicken. So this would be the slow twitch glycolytic muscle. Lots of mitochondria because it's going to have a good supply of oxygen. Myoglobin. Myoglobin's this pigment that waits for blood to bring oxygen by, sneaks around, picks oxygen's pocket, and seals the oxygen, or seals the blood's oxygen. And blood vessels. Because of this myoglobin and blood vessels and lots of mitochondria, it's able to make a nice continuous supply of oxygen. So these are called slow twitch oxidative sometimes. So slow twitch, here's a marathon runner. This picture was stolen from Google, so I have no idea. She looks a lot more like a sprinter than a marathon runner, but I will let you judge that one. It is fatigue resistant. You are going to use them for long distance races. So last September, I was doing this half marathon, but to do the half marathon, you had to run around or swim around the Santa Cruz Pier, bike all the way up to, I believe it was the Point Bonita Lighthouse and back, and then you got to do your half marathon. I was using these muscles. They are fatigue resistant. They last a very long time. Weeks later, I tried to do a different race, which was swim 400 meters, which got canceled, bike 6 miles, and then run a mile. I would have not used these muscles. I would have used something else. So slow twitch muscles, they contract slowly. They improve through continuous strength training. They're aerobic. They fatigue very slowly. They produce very little, and they're for endurance sports. Now, fast twitch glycolytic, what I should have been using in that second race, which I did poorly in. That is the thickest fibers, which means it has the most actin and myosin. It is going to be very powerful. Problem is, oxygen cannot diffuse all the way through it. It is so big, which means it's doing something called anaerobic respiration. It is going to get tired very quickly. So these would be the fast twitch glycolytic. Few blood vessels because not using oxygen. Oxygen can't get in. No myoglobin because it's not using oxygen. Few mitochondria because it's not using oxygen. So this is what I should have been using in that second race. Contracts quickly for improve through interval training. I did that yesterday. I ran a 7-minute mile. I was so proud of myself. It uses anaerobic energy. That's why it doesn't need oxygen. But because of this, it fatigues quickly. It's making lots of lactic acid, which actually helps balance the pH. Lactic acid gets a bad name. So it's used for very fast things. This is not Usain Bolt. I would have picked Usain Bolt for this picture. So 2 weeks after the half Ironman, I tried to do a super sprint. I had no fast twitch muscles because all my training was slow and long. So that's the white meat. The black meat is the slow twitch muscles. So there's an intermediate fiber. So this is the slow twitch. This is the fast twitch type 2B. You have an intermediate one, fast twitch oxidative. This is the dark meat. They're intermediate fibers. They are intermediate in diameter, amount of myosin actin, so they give you an intermediate amount of force. They have a good amount of blood vessels. They have a good amount of myoglobin. So this is the dark meat of your chicken. So they're good for long distance or medium distance races. So I was going to do a splash and dash this summer where I swam 1,500 meters, then ran a 10K. It got canceled. But I'd be using these muscles for that. So you're using them. You can go fast, but they will tire after a little bit. So they're fatigue resistant, but eventually they do fatigue. Intermediate amount of force. So I was probably using these on my sprint intervals and not the fast twitch because I have no fast twitch glycolytic muscles. So we'll leave it with this. I will ask you these questions for our next video. Thank you.